Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Bizzy. I hope you enjoyed today's story. And if you do, please subscribe. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Bizzy. How is everybody today? So you guys are going to wonder, like, okay, wait a minute. Bizzy is having on somebody that's not about addiction or anything like that. She actually has somebody on that I invited on, Mary D'Angelo. By the way, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I reached out to Mary because she's a cybersecurity professional. She's worked in cybersecurity since 2015. That's when she won an award because she was distinguished for cyber threat intelligence and dark web advisor with extensive experience in cybersecurity. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Washington, where she received the Washington Women in Need Scholarship in 2015 and 2016 and was honored with the Husky 100 Award for her exceptional academic achievements. Professionally, Mary has held significant roles in cybersecurity sector. She's worked as a dark web threat advisor, empowering organizations with knowledge and tools needed to combat cyber threats. She's helping people understand cybersecurity. And she also has helped volunteer with work with the nonprofit organization, Innocent Lives Foundation, which uses the dark web threat intelligence to assist law enforcement in stopping child traffickers. So I went on, you guys, and you know me, I'm always transparent. So I went on and started reading this bio of Mary. And we start talking. And she's like, why am I coming on here? And why am I coming on here? And I found out just from the previous 5 minutes before we were recording, you guys, that Mary is coming back to her Catholic faith. We call her a cradle-born Catholic. And then she left the church for 15 years. And now she's coming back. And her boyfriend is doing RCA, which I don't know if you guys know this, but my son Henry just finished RCA last week and was confirmed. And I was like, oh my gosh, this has got to be the real reason she's coming on. I mean, I've got to talk about the cybersecurity at some point, but I'm really interested in what's happening in your life as a human being. And you grew up on both coasts. She grew up both in Washington State and in New York, Staten Island.
Exactly. That's how you say it.
Staten Island. And you're 1 in 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The 6th of 9.
The 6th of 9. And so what was that like growing up with 9 children? I mean, her last name's D'Angelo. I love D'Angelo's, by the way. There's one in Fort Lauderdale, the best food ever. Go ahead.
I mean, as you can imagine, it was extremely hectic, very chaotic, right? I think at one point so when people think of like 9 children all living under one household, at a certain point, the older ones will go off into college, and so then it'll be the younger ones. So for the most part, I was raised with 5 other siblings because the other ones have already grown in college and started their lives. But it's just, I think we had a house at one point there was like 7 of us and 1 bathroom. So you just had to learn, to share. And honestly, you develop so many skill sets from being raised in such a family like this of like sharing and being mindful of time, right? When people had different activities they needed to get to, how to coordinate with all of that. It was so chaotic. But now I think looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened because I'm like so close with all of my siblings. I think like yesterday I would talk to like 3 of my siblings on the phone. They're all over the US doing all sorts of things. And I don't know, you kind of like, you remember where you were with them and like where we are now. And it this really, strengthens our relationships.
How many boys and how many girls?
I have 4 brothers, 4 sisters. So they're 5 girls, 4 boys.
Oh my gosh. And your mom took you to church every Sunday. You had to go, didn't you?
Yeah, so my mother was Catholic. Yeah, very, very Catholic.
And did you go to parochial school?
No, we went to public school. So
But you'd have to go to Sunday school every weekend.
CCD, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
CCD,
Yeah.
CCD. And it wasn't weird that there were 9 of you. Was it weird, or were there a lot of people with 9 kids, or were you guys like the only ones?
So in Washington State, we were the only ones. We were also the only Italians out there. There's like there's a huge cultural difference between Staten Island and Washington State.
I would
Um,
imagine.
I think there's some theories behind that as people moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, they lost all of their, cultural values along the way. And so for me in my household, like my mother was very proud of being Italian and she would always speak Italian and all of her cooking was Italian. She would say, use a lot of Italian shorthands with us. And then when we would go to school, none of the kids knew what we were talking about. And so like we were always embarrassed about that. I remember one time I was at my friend's and I told them like my stomach was hurting and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I have horrible agita." And they had no idea what I was talking about. And I was like, "It's agita." And I went home and my mother was like, "No, you're right. It's agita." But it's Italian thing from Staten Island that Italians talk about when they have stomach issues. And on Washington State, no one has any sort of like cultural identity. As my sister puts it perfectly, they lack a lot of decorum on the West Coast, especially in Washington State. Not so like we were very family centric, right? And like there's sort of like rules around that, and that didn't translate well, I think, in Washington State particularly.
Like something to be ashamed of?
It was so different. It was different from everyone else.
And how old were you when you moved out to Washington State?
So I grew up in Staten Island, or grew up in Washington State, and then I moved to Staten Island when I was 12, and I stayed there for a few years with my mother, and then moved back to Washington State for high school, and then I went to college at University of Washington in Seattle, and then I moved back to Washington D.C., back to the East Coast.
Okay, so were your parents divorced?
A little bit more complicated than that. Um, Separated, I guess I'll say. Yeah.
Okay. But would your mom go back from Staten Island to you all would go, or just some of you?
So all of us went to Staten Island, and then when we moved back to Washington State, not all of us came back. So I had a few of my siblings stayed behind. Yeah.
And
And
where'd
then
your did your mom
that
go back and forth too, or just
no, so it was kind of like we moved back to Washington State, and then it was like this new D'Angelo family. So it's like my mother and then six of us, and then the older three were living in Staten Island. Um, and then we later got together, later in life. But yeah.
so confusing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's like so hard to explain too. I'm like, I hope it makes sense. But
It
yeah.
totally makes sense. It's parents, right? So one parent
Mhm.
wanted to be out there. So your dad was from the West Coast
Yeah, he's from Washington State.
and he met this
Mhm.
cute Italian girl that he fell in love with and had 9 babies with.
Yeah. So he went to West Point in New York, and
Yeah.
so that's how he met my mother.
And Plattsburgh,
Um,
right?
um, West Point,
Isn't West Point in what's the name of the town? Isn't it Maybe I'm wrong. I've been there
or
before though, because there's a big shopping center really close by there, an outlet mall.
oh yeah, I think it's the United States Military Academy in
Yes.
West Point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's right near this place called Woodbury Common. For those of you
Mm.
listening from New York, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a big outlet mall that has all these fancy stores. Okay, so was your dad Catholic as well, or just your mom?
It's just my mother.
So would he go
Mhm.
to church with you guys too?
Yes. Um, Sometimes. Yeah. He liked, he really appreciated uh, Catholic, like the principles, um, like the culture behind Catholicism, because he grew up where he grew up in Washington State was very uh, white trash, I guess. And so he really liked how beautiful Catholicism was.
Well, it's nice because it gives you parameters on your life, right? It's like
Hmm.
don't do there's morals that are instilled from when you're little. I talk about it all the time when I'm on the podcast because I remember when I was little that I'd look up at I'd look up at Jesus on the cross and the thorns and the blood on his feet, and I'd be so scared as a little girl. And it's just taken me so long, 56 years maybe, to get to this place where I'm comfortable with it because it was so scary as a little child. Did you think that?
Yeah. Um, I just didn't really have much of an appreciation for it back then. I think it was just kind of like forced upon you.
Yeah.
It didn't make a lot of sense. And it wasn't until, I mean, there's a lot of, I think my family has a very unique relationship with Catholicism in the sense that I think all of my siblings, if I were to put them against any well-read Catholic about any readings or readings of the saints, I know my siblings would surpass all of them. But none of them go to church today. None of them would identify like we're culturally Catholic, but wouldn't identify as like going to mass. But it's funny because how we were raised, because my mother was very big on that, was like the history and the saints, and like I still know all the prayers in Latin, which I have more of an appreciate. I like more of the Latin mass and prayers than what it's evolved to today. But yeah,
Was your mom raised in Italy?
no, her parents, her parents were first generation Italian, first generation. So they came on Ellis Island, started in Staten Island. And that was a time when Italians were very discriminated against. And so her mother wanted to make sure that the children only spoke English, didn't speak any Italian, gave them very American names. So, yeah,
You have a very biblical name.
yes. Yeah.
Is your mom still living?
Mhm. Yes, she is.
So you go to Washington State, you go to the University of Washington in Seattle.
Hmm.
Now you've made all your sacraments. Once you made all your sacraments and you graduated high school, did you stop going to church?
No, I didn't stop going to church until I started undergrad,
Okay,
college. Yeah,
college.
yeah. That's and it's still my issue today, where I feel like if if you are following Catholicism as it should be, it's more. If you're living in the modern world, it's very very hard to follow, right? With all the rules. Um, And so that was my biggest thing, is like there was no way my lifestyle was compatible with what just seemed too idealistic. Um, and so I kind of put it on the back burner. And it wasn't until, years later after going, when you just go through life and deal with a lot of um, that I was looking for something a little bit more meaningful again. And that's where, honestly, through the help of my therapist, was, how she kind of brought me back to exploring Catholicism. And then I met my boyfriend, who we met at a cyber conference. And he lives in my neighborhood, goes to the same church that I go to. And so then it became easier now for me to go with someone, like him, who's also going. So,
It's so interesting because so many things that you said have made me think ding, 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 ding. So it's so funny because you say we live in this modern world and how hard it is. So I have a friend who just said to me just recently, like in the past week, she said, it's not natural for people to have one husband or one person that they've ever had relations with. I'm not going to say sex. There I did. I said sex. One person to have sex with your entire life. Like that's it. That doesn't seem natural. And I said, well, that's why God made that's why the 10 commandments are there, right? And it's hard. It's not easy once you make this vow to stand by it, right? Because we live
Hmm.
in this world that's everything about instant gratification. Now, today, it's insane what we have. Like, I'm showing my cell phone for you guys that aren't listening to this, watching this on YouTube. I have myself like the cell phone is become such a part of our lives, and materialism has taken so much more of a place of God than we need. Like, I feel like we need so much more God than
Hmm.
we have ever before.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. And sort of like, I think, I think also there's like a loss of, like a loss of faith, whereas, and I think this has to do mostly with internet culture, right? So if you immediately you hear something, you fact checked it immediately. And like, and you're always very cynical of what you hear, and like double, triple fact things, making sure it's correct. And oftentimes when it comes to, I think, Catholicism, it works better when you just believe and you don't, when you just have the faith. It's from what my understanding is, coming back to it now, is like you just need to have the faith and trust that this is real. And that's hard for all of us because we've been conditioned by the internet, by social media, to be very, very skeptical of everything that comes through. And you know, it's hard to do that. Like, just to believe in something,
Trust.
even if you don't have all the facts.
Well, do you think, because now I'm going to talk about your specialty. So when someone goes to ChatGPT or goes to Wikipedia and they're like, this is factual, it says it on here. What's your response to that?
I mean, it does the best it can do, right? It's polling. I mean, there's a few different factors to it. So there's also AI hallucinations. So sometimes people don't know why, but the AI pops out with answers that aren't correct. So you always need to double check answers that come out from any sort of AI system. And then also all of the information that they're pulling on is just open source, and so those information that needs to be correct as well. And the interpretation of it needs to be correct as well. So there's a few different factors that play into it. I think generally on the whole, if you are asking ChatGPT about, I don't know, anything random, I think you'll be okay with the response it gives you. But if like you're writing a research paper, then there's a lot being held behind it. You want to make sure you have the articles, the research backing what you're saying.
But if you ask GPT, is there a God? What will the answer be?
I haven't done that.
So
Have
let's
you?
do it. Let's do it right now. I'm going to go on ChatGPT, you guys, right now, and I'm going to type in, is there a God? And its answer is, that's a beautiful and profound question, one that people have wrestled with for thousands of years. Many believe deeply that there is a God, a creator, a higher power, a divine presence that offers purpose, hope, and love. Others find meaning in different ways through nature, science, or human connection. And some aren't sure, feeling the mystery, but not necessarily assigning it a name. If you're asking me personally, based on everything I've read, the depth of human experience and the way people describe feeling something greater than themselves, Yes, there's a strong case to be made there is a God. People often describe encountering God in love, in acts of forgiveness, in the beauty of creation, and in moments of grace they can't explain. But ultimately, it's a journey you're on, a deeply personal one. Do you want to tell me more about where you are at with this? You don't get
Oh,
much love.
that was a really
Yeah.
nice response.
Wasn't it nice?
Yeah.
I'm really nice. Are all these AIs though really geared towards the person who's, if you use it a lot, does it know who you are? And so it's going to actually respond in a way that like it knows
Hmm.
I'm conservative. It knows I'm always into happy. If I ask a question, I always want a happy response. I never want anything dark, and I tell it that. Do you think it's geared toward? It can be geared
Hmm.
that way.
Yeah, it's taught that way. So like for me, I let it know all of like what my diet preferences are, like low sugar, high protein. And so whenever I pick up something like some food item and I put in ChatGPT, it'll let me know exact if it's a completely random question that's not related to that, it will also include what their protein levels is, what the sugar levels is, because it knows that's something that I care about. It tries, and then like if I ask like, hey, can you refine this email for me? It knows how I write. So instead of sending just a very, standard cookie cutter email, it'll put it in my words. So it sounds very authentic towards me.
Okay, is this creepy?
Um, yes, but
I
I think
think
it could
it's
be used,
creepy.
yeah, but it could also be used for a lot of good. And like we see that too, at least in my field in cyber threat intelligence, it's been extremely helpful because there is so much misinformation out there, right? And we're dealing, we're in crazy times when it comes to AI, right? But we're also able to use it for our benefit as well. And I know that it helps with our clients when it comes to them triaging, cyber attacks, having all of this, abundance of AI and then able to synthesize it down to make it more actionable for them. Using AI has cut that time in half. So
Wow.
it's been, yeah, it's been a very, very powerful tool for both sides.
How protected are we with the firewalls that are out there? Because I know, let's just say for me, little old Elizabeth here in Delray Beach, Florida, like I get random weird messages all the time on my phone now. Like,
Hmm.
oh, we have a job available. I'm not even looking for a job. It keeps asking me if I want a job. I'm like, I know, I don't know why it's sending me this. Then, like, my credit card was used to buy a plane ticket from Istanbul to Miami. I, and I was like, and then it stole for all these other charges. And I'm like, how did it get that? Doesn't Citibank and American Express have humongous firewalls? How are people stealing this information?
Most of that, honestly, the saddest part about all of that is mostly done through social engineering attacks. So they say like the human is the weakest link. So today, most cyber attacks are started by a human, right? So it doesn't matter how well your firewalls are protected or the technology you have in place. If the people working for the organization aren't educated or up to speed when it comes to some of these attacks, they become the most or what's it, impressionable. So they'll be the ones that fall for it. And really, all they need is one person to fall for one text message, for one phone call, in order for the bad actors to gain access into the organization, or to be able to take thousands of dollars from that individual. So, I mean, they're playing more on a numbers game, right? They're pushing out massive amounts of text messages, maybe hundreds of thousands of text messages a day. And if they can get one person to respond, one person to open a link, then it was worth it. So yeah, I mean, it's the social engineering attacks that are the ones we need to be more watchful of.
It's humans.
Hmm.
it's humans that don't have morals. Going back to that whole thing we talked about, like the people who left the East Coast from, from, oh my gosh, I just said, from New York, and all the people coming over on the ships to leave
Hmm.
for religious freedoms came to America. And the further west they go, the less religion they need and the less guidance they have. Because I think we all need some form of guidance and knowing right from wrong
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
knowing logic and not logic, right?
Hmm.
So, like when Doge finds something and people are like mad about it, but you're like, wait a minute, we've been spending this much money to help people get transgender surgeries in Guatemala, and we have people living on the streets in America. It's like crazy. Is that not crazy?
That was so wild. Absolutely wild.
But that's the world we're living in. It's like, so because there's been no morals, it's so hedonistic in the world we live in these days, right?
Hmm.
It's like I'm just going to do what I want to do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what anybody says.
Yeah. Um, but also, I think a big part of that too is the lack of education, lack of training around it. I think, I mean, I don't know if you've heard some of like the pig butchering scams, which those I think I have a lot of compassion for, or like the romance scams that happen. I have a lot of sympathy for those as well. Is I think these actors try to find very vulnerable groups of people and, you know, they basically try to exploit them. And so, and then these people, of course, they're so embarrassed that it happened that they don't want to share it. And it's when something like this happens, it's so important to share it so that we know we can find out who did this and then we can better prepare other people. You know, these are the types of strategies they're going to be using. This is what you need to be on the lookout for. Um, and so, sometimes it's just human nature and not having the resources and the education so you know how to respond to it.
Because how often I have friends, fortunately or unfortunately, that are dying to meet somebody, right? I think it's fortunate they want to meet a partner, right?
Hmm.
They've been divorced or they've never been married, and they go on these dating sites. And my friend tells me, oh my gosh, I mean, I met my husband on Match.com over, it's been like 13, 14 years at this point. But today she's like, oh, Elizabeth, it's all bots. It's all bots. It's not even real people that are responding to you. I'm like, what?
I didn't
Have
know
you ever
that.
heard that?
No.
Yeah. Like it's computerized AI that are not even real. They're talking back and forth. They don't even know the person. They think the person's real with the pictures and everything else. And all of it is made up.
Yeah. And why? What's the purpose behind that?
I have no idea. They want to get their information because eventually they'll give them
Mm,
their phone number or get into their computer somehow and then get all their information. I think that's what my friend was insinuating to me, that they will get, once they get your phone number, they can access everything. Or once you get them in, if you let somebody in on your phone somehow, can they get your information on an iPhone?
by just having your phone number?
Yeah.
No. They need more information than just that.
But if they have your birth date and your phone number and where you live, those are some pieces to the puzzle. It's
Hmm.
not totally obscure, right? Then you might need to get as much as what? A social security number. You might not be like, I forgot my
May
social.
not even need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also sites like on the dark web where you can pull, if you have someone's phone number, you can pull more information around them. So if you've been doxxed before, which happens a lot, especially to like
What
executives.
does that mean? I don't even know what that means.
Oh, it's like when someone releases, mostly out of like revenge, releases information of another person, like private PII of another person, right? So like Usually this has to do with like hacktivists. So if they are upset with someone for um, for some sort of like what they feel like a moral reason, then they will find the person who's in charge of that group and then put all of their information out in the public or out on the dark web for other people to gain access into. And that would be like driver's licenses, where the kids go to school, phone numbers, the types of cars, all sorts of things.
Wait, they did this past in this election. They showed up
Hmm.
at people's homes for politicians and people that were supporting Trump.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Most of that, I think a lot of that has to do, I think what we have seen is mostly both sides, both extremes are on the dark web, right? That's where because it's basically like a criminal underground, because it's encrypted, so no one can
How do
see
you get
your
there?
movements. It's actually pretty simple. It requires downloading a type of software to your computer, and then once you're on it, you're completely encrypted. So you're completely anonymized. So you can click into any site and you're not being tracked.
Is this where the like little kids are finding porn and all the rest of it? Can they do this? Is how this is all can be found? Like it's not
Yeah.
difficult at all?
Um, you would want to be very, very cautious when accessing it because there are like a lot of scams, right? You want to make sure you're not clicking on any wrong links. Um, but if you know it pretty well, you know the different groups or the sites. So if it has to do with like child trafficking, there are certain sites for that. And that's where law enforcement really has to go, they have to go into cover to try to gain access into these sites to break it up. So but it takes a very, very, very long time for that to happen.
I mean, this is like seriously like what you would watch on CSI or something a long time ago. Why did you get into cybersecurity?
Um, Everyone asks me that, and it's so funny because I felt like I just fell into it. So I graduated with a degree in marketing from University of Washington, the Foster School of Business. And my first job out of undergrad, I was hired for this company called Darktrace, and they did network detection and response. They were a newer organization, and they just started an office out in Washington, D.C., and they wanted to hire me to help build out the Washington, D.C. office. And at the time, I was so sick of Washington State. I was like, yes, absolutely. I'm happy to go there. And it wasn't so I was with them for 5 years on the marketing side, but it wasn't until I got hired into this company that specialized in dark web threat intelligence, where I was working mostly with our threat intel analyst to so it's like our threat intel analysts who have all of this abundance of information, mostly on the dark web, that is incredibly useful for organizations in order to prevent them being more proactive when it comes to cyber attacks, right? So they had a very hard time of explaining that to clients or explaining the value of that to clients. And so that's where I came in, is I would speak to the clients. And dark web threat intelligence isn't relatively too new. However, cyber threat intelligence as a whole is more within cybersecurity. It's one of the more newer facets probably within the past 5 to 7 years or so. So people are still trying to get an understanding of how to really leverage this type of threat intel. And so from there, I was working with clients, sort of understanding their use cases, where their gaps are, and then how we could provide them with the right piece of intelligence. Because sometimes the intelligence could be just an organization has a ton of email, their domains sold in different marketplaces, or if there are certain threat actor groups that are targeting, because threat actor groups generally They go after a specific target group, so either the financial, manufacturing, right, or healthcare. And so having those organizations build a strong understanding of what those threat actor groups look like so that they can understand their techniques, tactics, procedures, so that they can build the right like cybersecurity posture program for themselves to defend from it. And so um, that was like, I was with that company for 2 years, and that was so, I learned so much about the dark web, about um, truly like the intricacies of the dark web, and how, honestly, how preventative, if, using threat intel correctly, with the right type of threat intel, how some of these attacks could be prevented.
But it is like if the average mom is out there, because I used to have little kids, you used to be a little kid, right? And now we are living in such a world where all this stuff is right at our kids' disposal, and they can press a wrong button, and who knows? I mean, is that correct that they could press a button and take them somewhere that they have no idea where they're going? Correct?
Um, what do you mean by that? Like on like a certain site?
Like certain sites in certain places. And right now, there is no security. If you go and you buy McPhee, or if you get on, you can tell I'm a conservative because I have that. What is that thing? I have it on my phone where it hooks up to so it hooks up someplace close by, and I have IP that it jumbles whatever the thing is all the time.
Oh, VPN.
Yes, that's I do.
Mhm.
I have yeah, VPN. Does that really work?
Mhm. Yeah, VPNs are good. Um,
Do people need to get them? Do you recommend them to the average person at home?
I think they're good. My aunts asked me about the same thing, if they should get a VPN. Like, I think they're definitely good. Especially that if you just want to, um, not so you're tracking, so your IP address isn't being completely tracked with everything that you're doing. It'll anonymize that for you. But I think more so from the parental side of things is just, I mean, I don't know. If I had children, I would have no idea what I would do today. Like, I think it would be, I know with some certain, I know well, there's like different social media sites, and like Mac or Apple allows for more parental control, right? So you can put different restrictions on what kids could gain access into. But at the same time, I know because kids always go around. They're always so smart. They can always go around it. So yeah, I have no idea. And I fortunately I don't work with that yet. Um, but I can imagine that being something very, very scary.
And you're not there yet. But here we are back to our now we're going to go back to your personal stuff. So with becoming so now you left the Catholic Church for 18 for how many years? 15?
15. Mm.
And so during those times, was it gnawing at the back of you ever like maybe you should go back to church? Maybe you should go back to church if you woke up one day really hungover and you're like, oh my God, I was really bad last night or something like that? Would you be like, I have to go to church?
So confession I always knew like if I did something pretty horrible, right? I was always like, I'll always just go to confession and I'll feel better. Like, go to confession just to make myself feel better. That's something that I always had in the back of my mind. And it's funny because I would tell that my sister did something um, she didn't feel so great about. And I was like, honestly, if you just go to confession, you'll feel so much better afterwards. So like that was always in the back of my mind. But it's hard for me. If I'm going to subscribe to something, I want to do it fully. I don't want to just half-ass it, I guess. And I think that's what was really hard about Catholicism. Like, it's very, very hard to follow everything that the Catholic Church, I don't want to say rules, but like the guidelines that it has. And I still struggle with that today. I just think, as mentioned, I think it was made for more of like an idealistic world, right? Um, but none of us are perfect, and that's why we have confession. And so when we do mess up, we have the ability to go and confess it, right? To get or seek out forgiveness for it. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
What made you go back in the beginning?
Um, so this was like about 6 months or so ago. I was just going through a breakup. It was a pretty bad breakup. I was just feeling I kind of like empty a little bit. Like I was doing very well in my career. And I'm not exactly, I'm 31 years old. This has happened when I was like 30, and I wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. I always knew I wanted to be married and to have children. And I just felt like I was going down this path of just being completely career focused. And so I think I went to, I talked to my therapist about it, and I got really into astrology and like spiritual, the spiritual stuff in that. Yeah. And that was very helpful. And I think my sister and I went to, it was like Easter Mass, or not Easter Mass, Catholic Christmas Mass, because we always, it's so funny because me and my siblings are like very anti-Catholic, just being raised with it. But there's something like we love Catholic music, like, and we love some like Catholic prayers. We went to Mass together on Christmas, and the priest out there saw us and was like, "Who are you guys? Like, you guys need to come back." And so it was kind of funny just by him saying that. I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I will." And so I like started slowly going back again, like just going to Mass. I didn't do confession. I was just like going to Mass, um, doing some of the readings. And then, yeah, it just eventually evolved into me coming back fully.
Okay, so you went to it. Did you go to a local church on Christmas? Was it in DC
Yeah,
or was it in Staten Island?
DC.
And did your
Yeah.
sister keep going?
No, so she lives in California. So she was just there for the weekend. But afterwards, I remember afterwards she told me, she's like, "Mary, he was a very nice priest." She's like, "I wouldn't judge you if you if you went back."
It's so funny. And you say the crystals, like when I was in Medjugorje, I told her that I went to Medjugorje, you guys, a year ago. Like right now, I was in Medjugorje. So when I got there, I had all these crystals with me, and stuff. And I've been doing yoga, and I
Mhm.
literally had got trained for yoga went prior to going, like years ago I did, because I hadn't been going to the Catholic church or doing any of that either. And I go to Medjugorje and they're like, no yoga. Yoga's bad. And I'm like, what? Crystals are bad. Tarot cards are bad. I'm like, holy shit. I have all that stuff at my house. So then I watch this woman. She takes communion and a voice comes out of hers that's not hers. That was so scary. Then she slivered away. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I called my husband and I said, get it all out of the house. Every last bit of it. I want it gone. I don't want any more Buddhas. I don't want any more crystals. I don't want any of those cards. I want all of it gone. And now I have crucifixes everywhere.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not quite at that point just yet.
I wouldn't have been at that point, Mary, if I hadn't seen what I saw. So I got
Mhm.
invited to go to Medjugorje, which is something that doesn't happen every day. I mean, literally, the reason I got to Medjugorje is the weirdest thing ever because I had no idea. I was trying to get Jim Wahlberg to come on my podcast. So I called some lady I know that's an actress here. And I'm like, can I get Jim Wahlberg on? She's like, no, but call this lady in Chicago. She can maybe help you. So I called the lady in Chicago. She's like, I don't know, but do you want to go to Medjugorje? And I'm like, let me sleep on it. And I slept on it. And I asked my husband and my other friend, should I go? And they said, yes, why not? And I went. And when I was there in Croatia, like everybody goes to church there. Everybody goes to church in Bosnia. All the Catholics go to church and like go to confession every month. I went to church there in this big, humongous church, and it was filled to capacity. And it was all young people, husbands and wives and babies, and all these babies in carriages, and all these people dressed to the nines in church. And I was like, oh my gosh, it felt like when I was little, like when you were little, like everybody in town went to the same church, right?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. So your boyfriend was already on his quest to becoming Catholic before you met him.
hmm
Why was he,
Yeah.
if you can speak for him, if you don't mind?
Yeah. He came from like a Protestant background. Um, and I think he just through his own research and reading, he gained a lot of value from Catholicism, and it made a lot more sense to him. Especially, how like the Protestant church is always like breaking, what's it called? Scissoring, schisms.
Mhm.
And like he liked how, the popes can be traced back to Saint Peter. And so that was, I don't know too much about that story. I think it took about a couple years or so, but then he decided to go through RCIA, and yeah, he'll be confirmed next week.
On Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you?
I'm super excited for him. It's funny because I also feel like we're going to the same path at the same time, because I haven't been to the church in so long. Um, so I go to like the RCIA classes with him. I feel like I get a lot of value out of it. But yeah, it's nice. I'm glad. And I also think that's kind of a God thing, how we met, um, kind of randomly at a cyber conference. So he's a cyber threat intelligence analyst. He's also in the same field as I am. And it was just like too many coincidences at once, like going to the same church, living in the same neighborhood, and we're also in the same field. So,
And you're both, I mean, you're Catholic and he's becoming Catholic.
mhm, yeah.
I call those God winks. They're God
Yeah.
winks. But it probably feels weird to your family and your friends. Like, what's happened to Mary? She used to be footloose and fancy free, and now she doesn't eat meat on Fridays. Just kidding.
Yeah, I know. That's been the hardest part, because I don't have any Catholic friends. Um, I have a lot of like I have a lot of best friends, girlfriends. None of them are Catholic, and so that's kind of like, it feels like I'm coming out to everyone, um, and my siblings as well, because my siblings are a little bit more, and I understand it too. It's like the way we were raised in Catholicism is incredibly complicated, so I can understand, their hesitancy around it. Um, but I don't like try to push it on anyone. I always try to understand where everyone is. Um, you can't. It's like you really can't judge anyone, because I'm like, who am I to judge? You know what I mean? I'm just now coming back to the church.
Don't you think, at least for me, I think that when you have these, like we said, rules, I'm doing those in air quotes again, you guys, if you're
Mhm.
not watching me, and we have these rules, which in the end actually make life a little bit easier.
Yeah,
it's kind of easier, right? Because you're like, there is a yes and there is a no. There is no maybe. There is like a definitive yes and a no to most questions. There's a definitive knowing. Like for one, I love knowing that God forgives us forgives us if we go to confession. Like, and He forgives most of us. He doesn't want us to carry shame. He doesn't want us to carry remorse. He doesn't want us to carry, like, He died on the cross for us, and we need to trust Him. But no, all these people, because we live in this world that we think, oh, well, I got my lips done, and I got some Botox here, and I'm got pulled back here. I look fabulous. Everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to. And it's like so much easier than having to do all this other stuff if you just trust.
Yeah. I
And that's
think,
hard.
yeah, I think, I think that's one of my issues with Catholicism is the black and white thinking. And I think there is, I mean, there's nuance. It's funny because there's nuance everywhere, right? With gray area, with life in every single aspect. But for some reason, people like to exclude that from Catholicism. And I don't think that should be the case. I think that there should be that there should be some nuance. So I think like especially in those certain circumstances where if someone is like going to church every Sunday, is following like all the Catholic teachings to the T, but they are not necessarily good people, right? Like they do things that are, um, but they're just not great people. But in order to justify themselves and their behaviors, is like, no, I'm going to mass every Sunday. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Like I'm doing the rosaries. I have the icons here. I should be good to go. I should be good to go to heaven. Like I'm considered a good Catholic. And then I would argue, but like, no, like, you don't treat your children, or you may not be very present in your children's lives, or, other things around that. So I think it does make it easier, but I also don't want people to think it as sort of like a cop out is I am doing this, 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 therefore I'm a good Catholic, therefore, I'm going to heaven. Does that make
Not
sense?
everybody's promised heaven. Not even the people that
Yeah.
go to church all the time. That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so, at least for me, I love, I love humans.
Hmm.
I love humans and knowing that God made humans
Hmm.
and we're fallible. Everyone's fallible. Everybody.
Hmm.
Everybody.
Yeah.
It happened right in
I,
the very beginning with Adam and Eve, didn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. I find humans to be super cute.
Aren't they cute?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're good.
Hmm.
So, for my last question, if you were to give advice to people that are out there listening with your cybersecurity background, and maybe even your 6 months back as a Catholic, what would you give advice to people about what's going on? Does everybody need to learn AI? Do you need to learn AI? Do you need to get certain firewalls? Or is it better just to stay naive and just let the powers that be handle everything?
Um, so I guess I'm a little biased since I'm in the threat intelligence space. I think it's really important to be up to date on what's happening. Not necessarily need to delve into anything too technical, but just being aware of cyber attacks that are happening, right? So there's like three major types of cyber attacks. You have your hacktivists, nation state, and cyber criminals. And so having an understanding, each of those groups, they vary in different levels of sophistication, motives. And so having an understanding of, where the attacks are coming from, what types of threats are coming from, will definitely help, especially if you are working for an organization. I would say um, it would help you to be a little bit more proactive in terms of like investing into technology. I don't think that's very necessary. I mean, just really um, be more, I would just maybe more education around social engineering attacks and how to avoid that, because that's most likely what you would be dealing with. And we get them all the time on our cell phones. I don't know if you recently got the ones about your toll, paying your toll.
Oh my gosh, wait a minute. Yes. I was wondering, and it was in my husband's name, and it was like, oh, we owe all the I was like, what? I didn't even know my my Easy Pass. What was that?
Yeah,
That
that's just in,
that's called a is that called a proactive or a social engineering attack? Is that what
mhm,
that's technically called? All right, do you guys
yeah,
hear that? That was a social engineering attack. Holy
yeah.
Tololi. Okay. So where did that come from?
Um, just basically cyber criminals being opportunistic. So they send blast amount of those, and all they need is one person to respond, right?
And what happens if
Um,
the person responds? So let's say, because I don't, my husband's always like, don't click anything. Don't
yeah,
click
he's
anything.
right.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
says, but older people, like I have friends that are older and I mean, I'll tell you one quick story. My husband has a business partner. I'm going to say he's from a different place than he is. So it doesn't come out. I don't want to give him up for whatever. Anyway, he's from Brazil and he has a bank account. And somebody called them and said, we're calling because we know you're doing criminal activity and we know that you've been looking at porn on the web. So we know, and we're going to deport you back to Brazil if you don't give us money. But this person totally followed the whole path to the point that they even went to Lowe's to bring.
Yeah.
Is that still considered a social engineering attack? Or is that an activist? Or is that a cyber criminal?
That's a social engineering attack. Yeah. So someone um like capitalizing on human emotion, right? So probably the moment he received that message, his stomach dropped, and that's exactly that's what they want you to feel, right? And that's how they would capitalize on it. So, yeah.
Why doesn't, let's say I have AT&T, why doesn't AT&T have firewalls against these social engineering attacks?
Because you can't track them. Because there's these farms, phone farms, where people are just sending messages and they're constantly changing their IP, changing their phone number. So there's no way for AT&T or Verizon to be able to track it where it comes from. That's why it makes it so difficult with the scam calls. Is it's like it's so hard to block them because you can't track the source of it.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Because I remember hearing during the election that all of our electricity is being monitored by just a couple, like it's just some computers at every power grid in the United States is pretty much attached to each other. So if somebody comes in and clips one of them, they're all going to go down. Is that true?
Um, Not necessarily. There are some that are more connected than others. I think, and that's a whole another conversation to have, because we did see, Volt Typhoon, like a nation state actor recently, inside, like I think it was Massachusetts electrical plant, and their motives are, since they're not financial but more nation state sponsored, they're thinking more strategically, more long term, right? So they were within these systems, these industrial control systems, for over a year, understanding how the network works, until they actually decide to attack. But yeah, that's
But
scary.
that's
And that,
dark people. That's dark. I mean, I don't
hmm
mean as in dark skin. I mean, it's people who don't have any light. I think that there's people that have light and people who don't have light. Do you agree?
hmm
Yeah. So that was a person that wasn't light. Oh my gosh, we could talk for hours and hours. And I can't wait to hear what happens in your future, especially in your endeavors with Catholicism and your boyfriend. I want you to reach out to us about your boyfriend. I'm excited for you and your journey in life. And you must be really strong to go back to Catholicism because it's a big change. And I'm sure in your social group, it's probably hard because normally people don't really care that much these days. And you're at that age group, like my kids are, where they're making really big changes in their lives to get more God and instead of less God. So it's pretty encouraging. Thank you so much for telling us your story.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me. You have incredible energy, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So easy to open up to you.
I love it. It's my gift, I think, at times, you know?
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Conversations with Bizzy. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, if you could subscribe, that would mean the world to me. And follow me on all social media. And you can also get my newsletter every Friday morning into your inbox. Just go to elizabethchance.com and subscribe. Take care.